In this video, I'm going to talk about how to run a 31 in men's volleyball. Let's get right into it. I've been getting a ton of questions recently on how to run a successful 31. It's a really important route to run as a middle, and if you're a setter, you need to be able to know how and when to execute it on the court. The sole focus of today's video will be going over it entirely, breaking down a ton of film to provide you as much information on how to run your best 31 and also how to defend it if you're on the opposite side of the court. But before we do any of that, let's break down a little bit of why it is and what it is. It's called a 31 because previously sets were determined and named by their location and their tempo. So a 31 would be a set to zone 3, which goes from a scale of 1 to 9, and the 1 of the 31 indicates the first tempo speed. So it's basically a quick ball to zone 3 on the setting chart. An 11 would be a go ball to zone 1 to the outside. A 31 would be finding that sweet spot in between the middle and the outside. It's also referred to as the gap in today's game, or the 30 as well. Whatever name you have for it, however you determine it. It's a quick tempo ball, fast tempo, finding that slot in zone 3 and zone 4 in between the right side and the middle on the opposite side of the court. I'll be breaking down a lot of George Mason film today, and they use this signal, and so do a lot of teams for their 31s. So whatever your setter uses, entirely up to them, but this is what the Division I teams are using to signal and call out for this play. One other thing to note about 31s, it's typically run out of rotations 1, 3, 4, and 6. You might ask, why is that the case? Well, in rows 2 and 5, typically the middle will be coming all the way from the opposite side of the court. When you look at the setting trajectory, the middle is going to have to make that long path all the way around the court. Now, based on some of the film that I'll show today, there are some instances when that will make sense, but most of the time, rotation 1, 3, 4, and 6 to make it easier on your middle to get to that zone 3 path and execute this route. Some overall keys: timing is basically the same as a 1 ball. So if whatever your 1 ball tempo is as a middle, instead of running to zone 5 right in the center of the court, you're going to zone 3. So it might look a little bit more rounded if you're coming central. If you're approaching from the left side of the court, it might look a little bit more straight on. So wherever you are starting your angle of approach is going to determine the route and how it looks. I like a little bit of rounding in the route because I think it allows you to keep open and provide a good window for your setter to place that ball into. But if you're coming from the left side and you can just approach right onto that zone 3 route, that works as well. Your timing and your angle of approach is going to be dependent on where that set is. So if you get a perfect in-system 3 pass, you can probably approach right into that zone 3 path. But say there's a pass that pulls the setter deep onto the right side of the court, maybe it's a really long set, you might have to pinch that route in a little bit closer to zone 4 and 5 to make sure you have an option to still contact the ball and the setter can push it to you with that first tempo speed. It's also going to be predicated on where the opposition is blocking. If you have blockers on the other side, say a right side defender that is sitting right in your zone, you might not be able to approach in zone 3. I like my middles to go on the inside shoulder of the right side that they're going against. So say they're lined up right in zone 3, I like to have my middles approach maybe in zone 4. So they still have an option to cut that ball inside and find the gap, find the hole in between the right side and the middle blocker. Executing it well is depending on the speed of the setter and make sure you're connecting, but first you have to be in the right position to make sure you're not hitting the ball right into a blocker. The faster you run your 31, the more difficult it is to defend. The more in line your route is with the shoot tempo on the outside, puts that right side on the other side of the net in a really compromising position, deciding if they're going to help out or if they're going to pull to their guy. Being aware of what the tendency is of that right side if they're willing to help out, or if they're likely going to pull to the outside. Lets you know as a middle if you're able to turn that ball down the line or focus on a deeper shot into the seam and center of the court. And in the same token, it's really good to know the middle's tendency as well. There's some teams that don't even acknowledge the 31. They will let that ball go. They will wait and react in the middle, especially when that ball is pushed outside of the 10-foot line, as it certainly increases the degree of difficulty to connect on a 31 route when you're pushed further away. But if that's the case and your opposing middle does not stick with you to your route, and you can take advantage of that and certainly put up a couple balls away. We've had a couple instances where you get a right side and you get an opposing middle that stick to that 3 and 4 zone and try and take that ball away in certain rotations. So one thing you can do as a middle when that happens is to counter with another route. So maybe fake the 31 route and go to a float route, which is basically approaching left and then floating towards the setter. Mason Moore did that better than anyone. He's really good at selling that late move and often finding open nets to really take advantage and make it tough on the blockers. All right, looking at some pieces of film here, looking at this first clip against Penn State. Mason is in rotation 3 with Evan here starting in the 4 here. So really short angle of approach for him to get right into that 31. And you can see with the perfect pass here from Steph, how he's able to take advantage of that speed and find a good ball here. Again, notice how he finds that inside shoulder of the right side blocker and then hits that ball right into the seam, with an opposing middle here in Gabriel who is not committing on this ball. So when that opposing middle doesn't commit, you know you have a free lane to attack, and Evan does a really good job of putting this ball away on a well-located set from Troy here. All right, next play here, still in this Penn State match. Get a good serve here, and this time Mason is in row 2. Eli's all the way on this side of the court. So that's why I say sometimes it's more challenging to run a 31 out of row 2, but I'll show you why this is effective. You have the same middle here who didn't commit on the 31 previously. That is the same on this play, but also you have a right side who doesn't help at all and pulls right to his guy. So the result is an open net. And a 1-on-0 for Eli puts this ball down and makes it really easy. So having an understanding of where the opposing middle is going to be and do at the D1 level, you have to really stick out for this BIC and be prepared to close pin to pin. So knowing that in row 2, you're able to capitalize, take advantage of this gap, and put a ball away. Here's another play, and I kind of talked about as this ball gets passed further away from the center of the court, the longer of a set it is. So sometimes I like to bring this route a little bit closer, maybe from zone 3 to zone 3.5, zone 4 here. This is definitely a ball that is hittable and maybe just a misconnect here, but as this setter gets pulled further away from the center of the court and further away from the 10-foot line, I like to see this route find a little bit more of the inside of this right side blocker. And a lot of what we see at our level is middles following and committing on a more consistent basis because you see less of a BIC. You can see on this play here how as Mason's approaching from the center of the court here to his 31, how the middle is a little bit more aware and makes that commit step to go and close to that ball. And again, this is a lesson for Mason as well, as he sees this right side pulling. Maybe he wants to take this shot into the deep corner instead of trying to hit that ball, center of the court. One of the most common errors you see is just misconnect between the setter and hitter on timing. You see on this play is this ball just out of the reach of Evan, and that's, you can see how Troy's basically at the 10-foot line. So the further you get to the 10-foot line, the harder this set is to make, because you have to turn your body and make sure you're fitting it into the window of the hitter, which is pretty difficult when you're having to do that in midair in first tempo. I think Evan does a good job of staying open here and available. Troy's just got to do a better job of having a little bit less float on this ball and finding a good pocket for Evan to hit. The other thing to be aware of is, when you're facing a team that has a right side blocker that's willing to help out, that's a consideration as well, knowing if you have that shot down the line available or if it's better to hit this ball into the seam. A lot of takeaways from this one. I think my biggest one is just focusing on timing. It's a first tempo ball, so you should be jumping in the air at that point of release. So when that ball is in the setter's hands, you should be either ready to jump or in the air. That's going to give your setter a nice window to find that ball and make it easy for you to get kills when you're on time and those other blockers aren't committed. So the 31's useful for a lot of ways. It can be helpful to score offensively, but it also can be used as a decoy to set up the right side. If you're pulling all the blockers and they're committing to you on that route, it can set up the BIC, or it can set up the right side set as well. Really helpful set for your middles. If you're new to the middle position, I'd encourage you to get some reps in with your setters. Focus on not only doing it in first ball side out, but also in transition, because you see a lot of times at the higher levels when you get a scramble play, middles going to that 31, especially if it's a shorter route, and just easy to connect with middles and setters on some of those shorter plays. Remember your timing, remember your angle of approach, use your peripheral vision up there as a middle to hit around the block and find those gaps. That's all I got in this one. Thanks for watching. Appreciate all the comments as always. Let me know what you want in the next one, and we'll see you guys next time. Peace.
Thank you.